That would be followed by a landing at 4:27 p.m. at White Sands. This ground track would move on an almost northeasterly heading. The spacecraft would cross the Baja California Peninsula and then move across the Sea of Cortez, up across northwestern Mexico, across the New Mexico border, and to the landing facility. There's a third landing opportunity on that Orbit 203 of Discovery. That one would be to the Kennedy Space Center. This opportunity would see a deorbit burn at 3:26 p.m. and a landing at 4:23 p.m. at the Kennedy Space Center. The ground track would move in about a northeasterly direction. It would pass a bit offshore of the southern tip of the Baja California Peninsula of Mexico, cross northern Mexico, and then pass over the Texas-Mexico border well north of Laredo. It had passed not far from the Houston area, then over just about New Orleans, across the panhandles of Alabama and Mississippi, then skirt the coast along the Florida Panhandle and move down across the Gulf Coast of Florida and to the Kennedy Space Center. On the subsequent orbit, Orbit 204, this one to Edwards Air Force Base, we'd see a deorbit burn time of 4:54 p.m. Again, all these times are Central Times. And a subsequent landing at 6 p.m. This ground track would be, again, an almost northwesterly heading with a slight jog just before approaching the California coast. Again, the idea being to avoid passing over the most heavily populated areas of California. A second opportunity on Orbit 204 is to White Sands Space Harbor in southern New Mexico. This opportunity would see a deorbit burn at 4:57 p.m. with a landing at the White Sands Space Harbor at 6:02 p.m. This ground track would take the spacecraft, again heading in an almost northeasterly direction across about the center of the Baja California Peninsula, across the Sea of Cortez, across northwestern Mexico, and then up over the Arizona border, pass across the Arizona-New Mexico border, and then move over the White Sands missile range for a landing at the White Sands Space Harbor. The final opportunity today is on Orbit 205. That opportunity would see a deorbit burn at 6:32 p.m. with a landing at Edwards Air Force Base at 7:36 p.m. This ground track would move in an almost due easterly direction until it approaches the California coast, and then make that adjustment to avoid flying over the most heavily populated areas for a landing at Edwards Air Force Base. Again, all these opportunities are available today, and mission managers and flight controllers are anxious to get Discovery on the ground on Friday. The focus, of course, is the Kennedy Space Center. It's always the preferred landing site to avoid the expense and the time required to bring an orbiter from one of the other two sites back to Kennedy. That first opportunity is to Kennedy. And then on the second orbit that we talked about, Orbit 203, there are three opportunities. One's to Edwards, one's to Northrop, and one's to KSC. And managers have decided to focus on the Edwards and KSC opportunities during that orbit. For the subsequent orbit, 204, there are opportunities at Edwards and at Northrop. And of course, they'll be the focus of that orbit. The last opportunity of the day at Edwards on orbit 205 will be available only if the crew has not suited up for that first opportunity at KSC. The issue is leaving the crew in the entry suits for an extended period of time. So if